During the lunch break, I checked my phone for the 10th time. No new messages from Maria. I tried not to let it bother me. She was probably busy with the kids or out running errands. Still, a part of me wished for something, a text or a photo of them, anything to bridge the distance between us. The afternoon session was tougher. The questions came hard and fast, and I defended our proposals with practiced ease, yet my mind wandered to last night's dinner. Maria had seemed distant, her smiles too quick, her laughter forced. I had asked if everything was okay, and she had nodded, her eyes not meeting mine. Just tired, she had said. It was nothing, probably. Just the stress of my impending trip, I reasoned. But doubt has a way of growing in the spaces left by distance. By the time we wrapped up for the day, my energy was sapped. I skipped the usual networking, claiming a headache, and headed back to my hotel room. The room was just another box of transient space, but it was a relief to close the door against the world. I called Maria, hoping to hear her voice, to reassure myself. This time she answered. "Hey," her voice came through, a lifeline thrown across miles. "How did it go today?" Good, good. They grilled me, but I think they're on board," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "How are things there?" "How are the kids?" "They're fine. We had spaghetti for dinner, and Tommy spilled his juice again," she chuckled, and the sound was the sweetest thing I'd heard all day. But there was something off in her laughter, a hesitation that tugged at my worries. "We miss you," I said, letting my guard down, letting her hear the truth in my voice. "We miss you too," she replied quickly, too quickly. "Can't wait for you to come back." The line was silent for a moment too long. "Is everything really okay, Maria?" I pressed, needing to know. "Yes, of course. Just the usual chaos here," she assured me, but her voice was thin, like a thread holding back a heavier truth. We said our goodbyes, and I sat for a long time by the window, watching the city lights blur into the night. Something was not right. The feeling gnawed at me, insistent and unwelcome. I told myself it was just the trip, just the distance. Tomorrow, I would fly back home, and everything would be clear again. Everything would be okay. It had to be. I always thought coming home was the best part of any trip, especially a business trip that took me away from Maria and the kids. This time, I had the perfect plan to make my early return a special surprise. The last meeting wrapped up hours earlier than expected, and instead of rescheduling my flight to the next day, I switched to an earlier one that would get me home by dinner. I imagined walking through the door with a big bouquet of Maria's favorite flowers and a bag of those gourmet chocolates she loved so much. On the taxi ride to the airport, I thought about how to make the evening even more special. Maybe I'd take the family out for dinner at that new Italian place that Maria had mentioned a few times, or perhaps a quiet movie night with the kids, all of us curled up on the couch with popcorn and blankets. The possibilities played through my mind, each one bringing a smile to my face. Checking in at the airport was a breeze, and the flight was surprisingly smooth. I found myself tapping my foot impatiently as the plane taxied to the gate, my heart racing with the excitement of the surprise. Once in the terminal, I hurried to the baggage claim, grabbed my suitcase, and practically jogged to the taxi stand outside. The ride home was the longest part, every red light a test of my patience. I kept glancing at my watch, calculating the minutes until I could see their surprised faces. The taxi pulled into our neighborhood just as the sun was setting, bathing the streets in a warm, golden glow. It felt like the universe itself was in on my plan, setting the perfect scene for my return. As we turned into our driveway, I noticed immediately that something was off. There were more cars parked along the street than usual. Puzzled, I paid the driver and hurried to the front door, my keys already in hand. I was so focused on the surprise that it took me a moment to register the faint sound of music coming from inside the house. It was unusual for Maria to play music so loudly, especially with the kids likely already in bed. I opened the door quietly, still holding on to the hope of my surprise, only to have it shattered in seconds. The sight that greeted me was far from the warm welcome I had imagined. The house was alive with sounds and lights, and there at the center of it all was Maria, not waiting for me but laughing and dancing, surrounded by people I didn't recognize. And among them distinctly were three men, each too close, too familiar, My heart sank, a mix of confusion and anger welling up inside me. This wasn't the homecoming I had envisioned. It wasn't the life I thought we had built together. In Every time I have to leave for a business trip, there's a tug in my chest, a kind of heaviness that doesn't go away until I'm back home. This time was no different. I looked around at the quiet hum of our home, the walls lined with pictures of smiling faces, moments frozen in time, the kids on their first day of school, our last Christmas, and the vacation we took to the beach where Ellie had first felt the ocean waves tickle her toes. Maria stood in the hallway, her arms wrapped around herself as if she could hold back the time that was pulling me away. She tried to smile, that brave front she puts up every time I have to travel for work, but her eyes gave her away. They always did. "I'll only be gone for 3 days," I reassured her, pulling her into a hug. She smelled like lavender and something sweet, like the cookies we had baked together last weekend. "I'll be back before you know it." The kids, Tommy and June, were at school, unaware I would be gone by the time they got back. I preferred it this way, easier than dealing with teary goodbyes or the clingy hugs that made leaving so much harder. I grabbed my suitcase, the handle cold under my fingers, and pulled it to the door. Turning for one last look at Maria, I wished she'd asked me to stay. But she didn't. She never did. She understood why I had to go. These trips were what paid for the mortgage, the car, the quiet life in the suburbs that we had traded our dreams for. The drive to the airport was a blur of red taillights and the same old songs on the radio. I parked in the long-term lot and boarded the shuttle, every mile taking me further from Maria and the kids. I tried to focus on the meetings ahead, the clients I needed to impress, but my thoughts kept drifting back home. I wondered what Maria was doing, if the kids had liked the lunches she packed for them. At the gate, I bought a coffee and a newspaper, the warmth of the cup seeping into my palms, offering a small comfort. Flipping through the pages, I caught sight of a family laughing together in an advertisement for a resort. It stung a little, a reminder of what I was missing out on. I folded the paper away, took a sip of the bitter coffee, and let out a deep sigh. This was the life I had chosen, the life we had chosen together. A life of small sacrifices for bigger gains, or so I kept telling myself. As the boarding call echoed through the terminal, I stood up, slung my bag over my shoulder, and joined the line, each step a reluctant march away from home. "Just 3 days," I whispered to myself, stepping onto the plane, the familiar shudder of the engine a cold comfort. 3 days, and I'd be back. Back to my family, back to where my heart truly lay. It was just a matter of time. The conference room was colder than usual, or maybe it just felt that way because of the nerves. I sat at the head of a long, glossy table, surrounded by potential clients, their faces a blur of polite interest and skepticism. Each presentation slide was a battle, each statistic a parry against their doubts. I talked about growth trajectories and ROI, all the while a part of me was counting the hours until I could return home. That moment, the flowers and chocolates that I had been so eager to give seemed pointless. Their sweetness turned bitter in the light of the truth unfolding before me. The whole world seemed to stand still as I stood there, unnoticed, watching the scene unfold before my eyes. The music was loud, drowning out the sounds of laughter and chatter that filled the room. Maria, my Maria, was laughing in a way I hadn't seen in a long time, carefree and wild. It stung. Around her were 3 men, each vying for her attention in a way that twisted my stomach into knots. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I just stood there watching as one of the men brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering a little too long on her cheek. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, the keys digging painfully into my palm, a stark reminder of the reality I had just stepped into. It took a moment for her to see me, to notice the figure standing awkwardly by the door, suitcase still in hand. When her eyes finally met mine, the laughter died on her lips, her smile faltering as she realized I was not a mirage. The color drained from her face, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and surprise. The music continued to play, a cruel soundtrack to the crumbling scene. The room felt oppressively hot, the air thick with betrayal. I wanted to shout, to scream, to ask her why, but my voice was trapped behind the lump in my throat. How long had this been going on? How had I not seen the signs? My mind raced, replaying every late night, every unexplained absence, every moment that now seemed a lie in this new, harsh light. One of the men turned to see what had caught Maria's attention, his smirk fading as he followed her gaze to me. The others, sensing the shift, paused and turned, their expressions ranging from confusion to indifference. They didn't know me, but they knew of me, the husband, the obstacle, the surprise no one wanted at a party. Maria moved towards me, her steps hesitant, her hands outstretched as if she could somehow push the reality away and bring back the facade. Her mouth moved, words trying to form, explanations or excuses, I didn't care which. But before she could speak, before she could bridge the gap between us with hollow words, I dropped my keys on the floor, the sound echoing sharply against the tile. I came home early, I finally managed to choke out, the words heavy with a grief I hadn't expected to feel. The statement hung between us, a bridge too far to cross, a chasm too deep to fill. The party, oblivious or indifferent to the drama, continued around us. Glasses clinked, laughter bubbled up from the corners of the room, and the music played on, a mocking reminder of what I had lost. I stood there rooted to the spot, by a heartbreak profound and perplexing, my life as I knew it upended with the turn of a key. In that heavy silence that followed my declaration, the weight of each second was unbearable. Maria finally broke the silence, her voice a tremulous whisper that barely carried over the music. "You weren't supposed to be back until Sunday," she said, the words not an explanation, but an acknowledgement of my unexpected presence. "Why, Maria? What is this?" My voice grew stronger, fueled by a mix of hurt and anger. The question was pointed, direct, demanding an explanation I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. "It's not what it looks like," she began, a standard defense that made my heart sink even further. "We were just having some fun, that's all." Her eyes darted around, seeking either approval or support from the faceless crowd that continued to revel around us. "Fun?" I echoed, the word bitter in my mouth. "Is this fun for you, behind my back?" My tone was rising now louder, each word sharpened by betrayal. "Who are they, Maria?" I gestured vaguely towards the three men who now stood awkwardly to the side, their earlier bravado diminished under the gravity of the situation. "They're just friends, old friends from college. It's not... Friends don't act like that with someone's wife, Maria." I cut her off, unable to contain the swirling chaos of disbelief and realization. How long has this been going on? How many times have I been away, and this party is what happens? Maria's face crumpled, the facade breaking as she realized the depth of what was unraveling. "It was just a mistake, a stupid mistake. You were always gone, and I was lonely, and they were here." Her voice trailed off, not justifying, just stating, as if the facts of my absence and her loneliness excused the scene before me. "A mistake?" I repeated, the word hollow. "You call this a mistake?" My mind raced, trying to grasp the threads of my unraveling trust. I thought about the kids, about the life we had built with such care, all seeming like a fragile illusion now. "I'm sorry, I never wanted to hurt you," she reached out, her hand touching my arm in a plea for understanding. I stepped back instinctively, her touch foreign and unwelcome. "You should have thought about that before," I said, my voice cold, distant. I looked around, suddenly aware of the eyes on us, of the curious stares and whispered speculations. This wasn't just a private betrayal. It was a spectacle for an audience I didn't even know. "I think you should leave," I told her, the words final, sealing the distance between us. Maria looked at me, stunned, as if the possibility of such an outcome had never occurred to her. "Please," she started, her voice desperate, "let's talk about this. Not here, not like this." "There's nothing left to talk about," I said, the finality in my voice more for me than for her. I needed to escape, to find space to breathe away from the stifling air of betrayal. As I turned and walked away, the music, the laughter, and the sounds of what had once been my life faded into a dull, meaningless hum. Alone at last, I found myself driving aimlessly through the streets, the rows of houses blurring past. The silence in the car was suffocating, each thought echoing louder in the confines of my mind. I finally pulled over at a park, a place where Maria and I had often taken the kids, a place filled with memories of laughter and picnics under the sun. Now it seemed deserted, cold, a mirror of my own turmoil. I reached for my phone, scrolling through my contacts list aimlessly before stopping at Dave's name. He had been my friend since college, a confidant through ups and downs. I hesitated, then pressed call. The phone rang, cutting through the silence of the night. "Hey man," Dave answered, his voice immediately bringing a sense of familiarity and comfort. "Dave, I started, my voice breaking, the words tangled with emotion. "What's wrong? You sound off. Where are you?" I took a deep breath, trying to find the words. "I came home early from my trip. I found Maria at a party with some guys from her past. It wasn't just a party, Dave. It felt like more than that." There was a pause, a moment of processing. "Oh man, I'm so sorry. Do you want to talk about it? Where are you right now?" "I'm just sitting in the park, trying to make sense of it all. I don't even know what to do next," I admitted, the fight in me deflated by confusion and hurt. "Stay there, I'm coming to you. We'll figure this out together." Dave's voice was firm, decisive, the kind of support I needed at that moment. As I waited for Dave, I allowed myself to think about everything and nothing at the same time. How could things have gone so wrong? Maria and I had our issues, sure, but I had never stopped trusting her, never imagined she would do something like this. When Dave finally arrived, he found me staring blankly at the empty playground. He didn't say anything at first, just sat beside me, offering his presence as comfort. "Thanks for coming, man. I feel so lost," I confessed, the words heavy with the weight of my broken heart. "We'll get through this. You'll get through this," Dave reassured me. "First things first, you need to decide what you want to do about your marriage. Do you think you can forgive her? Do you even want to try?" I pondered the question, the future a murky path. "I don't know if I can. Every time I think about her now, all I see is her with them. How do you come back from that? It's not going to be easy, whichever way it goes, but whatever you decide, you need to think about what's best for you and the kids. They need you strong, whatever the outcome," Dave advised, his voice gentle yet firm. As we talked into the night, the raw edges of my emotions began to settle, not healed, but at least acknowledged. Dave's words, a mix of empathy and pragmatism, helped me start to form a plan, a way to confront the next day and the ones that would follow. The path wasn't clear, but for the first time since the disaster unfolded, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could navigate through this storm. The next morning I woke up with a grim determination to seek the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I started by looking through our home, the place we had built together, now a silent witness to our crumbling relationship. I sifted through drawers, checked emails, and looked at bank statements, searching for any clue that might reveal how long Maria had been drifting away from me. As I dug deeper, I found a receipt for a hotel that didn't make sense. It was dated during a time when Maria told me she was visiting her sister. There were emails too, exchanges with one of the men from the party, their tone too familiar, too intimate. Each discovery was a blow, yet I couldn't stop. I needed to understand the full extent of the betrayal. Driven by a mix of hurt and necessity, I called some mutual friends, trying to keep my voice neutral, asking if they had noticed anything unusual. It was a difficult conversation to have, my pride battling with my need to know. Finally, one of them hesitated long enough before answering that I knew there was more to the story. "Look, I thought you might have known, or maybe it was just a rough patch you were going through," he began cautiously, and then told me about seeing Maria out a few times with friends, including the men from the party. "I didn't think much of it, buddy, but they seemed close. Too close, maybe." Each piece of information was a puzzle piece fitting into a heart-wrenching picture of deception. I felt foolish, blindsided by someone I had trusted implicitly. With each confirmation, the foundation of our marriage, built over years of love and laughter, seemed to crumble a bit more. I sat down amidst the chaos of strewn papers and opened photos from our last vacation. Looking at our smiling faces, it seemed like a different life. one filled with trust and unguarded moments. How had things changed so drastically without me noticing? Was I too wrapped up in work, too absent? The questions circled in my mind, but they felt hollow, excuses rather than explanations. The last call I made was to Maria's sister, someone who had always been candid with me. She was reluctant to speak at first, but eventually her affection for me outweighed her loyalty to her sister. Maria has been lost, confused, she said, her voice filled with a mix of sympathy and reproach. She started seeing someone else months ago. I thought she was going to tell you to end it before. I'm so sorry. Hanging up the phone, I felt a numbing calm settle over me. The truth was clear, stark, and undeniable. My next steps were unclear, but at least I was no longer in the dark. Armed with the truth, however harsh, I could start to think about the future, about what was best for the kids and for me. The road to healing or deciding to part ways seemed daunting but necessary. The initial shock was gradually giving way to a resolve to face whatever came next with clarity and purpose. As the day wore on, the heaviness of everything I had learned pressed down on me with unbearable weight. I needed to confront Maria, not just for answers, which I partly had now, but to see where we stood, where I stood in her life, and where we would go from here. I decided to meet her in a neutral place, somewhere we could talk openly without the echoes of our family home around us. I texted her, asking to meet at the small cafe where we had first discussed moving in together, a place that once symbolized beginnings, now a backdrop for potentially painful endings. Sitting across from Maria, I watched her closely, searching her face for the woman I married. She looked back at me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and sadness. I know you've been looking for answers, she began, her voice trembling. I'm sorry for everything. I never wanted to hurt you or the kids. Maria, I found the receipts, the emails, and I've talked to our friends, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. I need to know from you why. Why did you let this happen? She paused, taking a deep breath before speaking. I felt alone more and more. You were always away, and when you were home, it felt like you were still somewhere else. These friends, it started out innocently enough, just company, just someone to talk to, but I let it go too far. I'm so sorry. Hearing her admit it so openly didn't provide the closure I thought it would. Instead, it opened a new well of pain, a realization of our mutual neglect that had grown like a chasm between us. What do you want now, Maria? Can we fix this? Should we even try? I want to make things right, she replied quickly, too quickly, desperation in her voice. I want to go to counseling together. I want to prove to you and to the kids that I can be the person you all deserve. I looked at her, really looked at her, seeing all the years of our life together flicker between us. I thought of the kids, of the good times, and the love that once seemed unshakable. I don't know if I can trust you again, I admitted, the words like shards of glass in my mouth. But I'm willing to try counseling. For now, though, I think it's best if we take some time apart. You should stay with your sister while we figure this out. Maria nodded, tears spilling over her cheeks. I understand, she whispered. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. I just don't want to lose you. As we left the cafe, the future was uncertain, our path together murky and fraught with potential heartbreak. But there was also a sliver of hope, a chance that through honesty and hard work, we might find our way back to each other, or at least find closure and a way to co-parent as friends, if nothing else. Whatever lay ahead, it was a journey we would now face with our eyes wide open, the lies and secrets stripped away, leaving only raw, painful, but perhaps healing truths. The weeks that followed were a blur of emotions and decisions. The first step was counseling, a process both painful and enlightening. We sat in a neutral room, across from a counselor who navigated the tumultuous waters of our marriage with professional detachment. Each session peeled back layers of neglect, misunderstanding, and hurt that had built up over years. It was like setting bones, painful but necessary for healing. In these sessions, I learned to express the hurt and betrayal I felt, while Maria shared her loneliness and the reasons behind her actions. We listened, really listened, to each other's pain for the first time in a long time. It wasn't easy. There were sessions where the progress seemed negligible, where the chasm between us felt too wide to bridge. But we kept at it, driven by a mutual commitment to at least understand, if not forgive. During this period, I also took time for myself, something I had neglected for too long. I revisited old hobbies that I had set aside. I started running again, feeling the pavement under my feet, the rhythm a comforting constant that helped clear my mind. I read books, losing myself in stories of other lives and other worlds, which helped me gain perspective on my own problems. I also spent a lot of time with the kids. We talked openly about changes in our family, ensuring they understood they were loved, and that whatever happened between their mother and me, we were both there for them. We found new routines, new traditions that strengthened the bonds frayed by the past month's upheaval. Self-care became a crucial part of my routine. I learned that taking care of my own emotional and physical well-being was not selfish but necessary. It was the only way I could be strong for my children, and even for Maria as we navigated our uncertain future. Maria and I began to find a new rhythm in our interactions, a cautious but growing understanding. The counseling sessions started to focus less on recriminations and more on how we could support each other through this period, regardless of the outcome. We talked about co-parenting in a way that would minimize the impact on our children, and we discussed how to remain a part of each other's lives as friends, if not as partners. The healing process was slow, and at times I wasn't sure if the trust could ever be rebuilt, but there was a growing sense of peace with the uncertainty. I had faced the worst of my fears and was finding a way through. Each day brought small victories, small moments of normalcy that, when pieced together, began to form the blueprint of a new life, a life where I could be whole, regardless of whether my marriage could be salvaged. As I looked ahead, I was cautiously optimistic. I knew that the road to forgiveness and trust was long and potentially out of reach, but I also knew that whatever the future held, I was prepared for it, grounded in a deeper understanding of myself and the imperfections inherent in all of us. I was learning to accept not only Maria's failings, but my own, and through that acceptance I was finding a way to move forward, with or without her by my side. Months had passed since the day I had walked into a scene that turned my world upside down. With time, the sharp edges of betrayal had softened into something more manageable, something resembling acceptance. The counseling had ended, not with a dramatic resolution, but with a mutual understanding that some things, once broken, couldn't be completely mended. Maria and I had settled into a routine of cordiality for the sake of the kids, and our interactions, though forever changed, had found a new normal. Living apart from Maria brought clarity. I had space to breathe, to reflect on what I truly wanted from life, and to explore who I was outside the context of our marriage. It was a period of profound personal growth, fueled by the trials we had endured. I found strength in my resilience, pride in my ability to adapt, and find happiness in moments I had once taken for granted. The kids adjusted better than I had hoped. They were resilient, bouncing back through the stability we both worked hard to provide. We were open with them, answering their questions with honesty appropriate for their ages, and they seemed to understand that while their parents' relationship had changed, their relationship with each of us had not. This stability gave them the security they needed to thrive, and seeing them so adaptable filled me with hope. Professionally, I threw myself into new projects with a vigor I hadn't felt in years. My work, once just a means to an end, became a source of satisfaction and a way to rebuild my sense of self-worth. I connected with colleagues on a deeper level and found that many had their own stories of personal challenges. These connections reminded me that everyone faces battles we know nothing about, and they gave me a broader perspective and greater empathy. One evening, While attending a school event for my daughter, I saw Maria across the room. She was with her sister, laughing at something a friend had said. Seeing her happy was a bittersweet reminder of all that had been lost, but also of all that had been gained. I realized in that moment that I no longer felt anger or bitterness. Instead, there was a sense of peace, an understanding that what had happened between us had led us both to grow in ways we might not have otherwise. After the event, we found ourselves walking out at the same time. A moment that would have felt awkward months ago now felt natural. The kids are doing really well, I said, starting the conversation on familiar ground. They really are, Maria agreed, smiling. Thank you for being such a great dad through all of this. And thank you for being a great mom. I know it hasn't been easy, I replied. It was a simple exchange, but it was genuine, a recognition of each other's efforts. As we parted ways that evening, it was clear that while our paths had diverged, we had found a way to move forward with respect and understanding. Life had changed, undoubtedly, but it was good again. The future, once a source of dread, now held promise and possibility. The lessons learned, the growth experienced, and the peace found were part of my new foundation, one built on resilience and a renewed sense of hope